Hi, I'm Tony DeLacy, and in this video I'd like to talk about fear and anxiety. Those two things are very similar. And if you're watching this video, that might be something that you're dealing with now. Or perhaps you're trying to think of ways to deal with it if and when it happens next. Fear and anxiety all stem from the same root cause. And if we understand why we're afraid, understand why we're feeling this, then of course we can find a solution, find a way out. Now there are loads of different types of fear and different types of anxiety. So I'm going to mostly focus on the more crippling ones. Less to do with social anxiety, that is, talking to people. But more fear and anxiety about the future. About what might happen next. Now, that's always a tricky thing to think about. What will happen next? Because there are three things we generally fear, and three things that are characteristics, three different areas of fear. And the first fear is fear that something bad is going to happen. And that's quite a scary one, where a lot of phobias begin or manifest themselves. Fear that for one reason or another something bad might happen in an event, an occasion, where we find ourselves at the mercy of this being a possibility. And that's a scary thought. It's a fear of the unknown, but it's a fear of what if this happens? A hypothetical pops into our mind. And it makes us afraid. It makes us anxious that it's going to happen. And we think of, well, what if it does happen? Then I know I'll feel this. I know that this might happen. I think this will happen. And this might be the result. Or, in fact, this will be the result. Sometimes our fear is so strong that we are almost sure that if something happens, then we already know the sequence of events. And that's very scary. And untreated, or if we don't address them, that only gets worse. And what also makes it worse? Funnily enough, if the event actually occurs. And then all of our fears regarding this, that it might happen, and then it happens. Well, then we go, well, maybe my intuition is correct, or maybe all these fears that I'm having, maybe they're true. That can be a thing that we think about later on. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. Well, that's one fear. That's one characteristic of fear. One way we can be afraid of the future. The second fear is losing something that we already have. So the first fear is fear that something bad might happen. The second fear is fear that, well, we have something that's good, then it can be taken away from us. That something bad is going to happen and that we lose something. The first fear is that fear that something happens. The second fear is fear that we lose something that's good in our lives. That is also really scary. Especially if you find evidence that shows that it happened in the past, and so you become more afraid. Fear that I know if I lose this person, this job, this sense of responsibility, this sense of meaning, then I know that I'm going to feel bad, going to feel awful, and I will fear it. And that's where real anxiety comes. That is also true. That's a big fear. Once we have something, we fear it going. And the third fear again is that thing that's stuck in the future. The third fear we could have is a fear not that something bad might happen, or we lose something that we have. It's a sort of fear of, well, rejection, I think is one way of putting it. Something bad happening, but putting so much emphasis on an event that either it goes well or either it goes wrong. And in a sense, our fear is finding out the answer. The fear of a heads or tails event. And that's very scary as well. Again, especially if you were hoping for it to come up heads. It ended up coming up tails. All of these fears, all of this anxiety that is created by the fear, it's all based on future events. Future events that we don't know if they're going to happen or not. And it's rooted in our past or what we have experienced. Possibly. Or it could be manifested from a more fundamental fear that happened in the past, that we were afraid of and it happened, and it manifests in loads of different ways. For example, someone can leave you, a relationship can end, and so you fear being in another relationship again, but you also fear trusting someone again, even just a friend. So you see how a big negative event that happened in your life can manifest itself in different ways, not just specifically the fear in the future. And that is because sometimes when we don't address negative things that happen to us, well, the only other option is to be afraid to run. And sometimes it feels easier to run, to not put yourself in that position. But we'll get on to that later on. But for now, you're probably watching this with a fear stuck in your head. Something you're afraid of that might happen. And you can't get away from it. Or perhaps you can distract yourself. And you probably have tried that. You've probably tried distracting yourself so you don't think about it. So you don't think about something that could potentially happen. And they're very scary. When that distraction ends, you may be trying to watch something, I don't know, a funny comedy series, for example. Or working out. But that fear might come back. It probably will. It probably has. And you fear it. You fear what might be. Now you're probably wanting me to tell you that it's not going to happen. that what you're fearing is never going to happen. You'll probably get half of what you're hoping for. But I can't say that. I'm sorry. I can't say that what you're hoping won't happen, what you're hoping might never come to pass, what you're hoping might just be a fantasy. Well, it might. Not that you should feel bad, but if you fool yourself into trying to think, no, it won't happen, it'll be fine at the end of the day. Well, I can tell you, getting itchy there. What I can tell you is, life is suffering. So there's always going to be a chance that you'll be presented with an event in which you will be expected to suffer. For all intents and purposes, you will be given something that you don't want. You'll be placed in an event you were worried about, and there it is in front of you. So I cannot say, in almost every situation, you will be fine. But you will be. But when it comes to worrying about that event, well, it might. You don't know. But really not going away. But you should, rather than thinking about what might happen, though you should, because there's a reason you're thinking about it. It's not what you're thinking. It's not so that you should be afraid. It's that there are two things going on in your mind. Your brain is giving you these hints. The first is one of the reasons why you're afraid of what might happen is because there's a gap that has occurred in your mind. A gap of whatever situation you're in, that you're tied to, that you think, well, what if something bad happens in this situation, this thing that you're in at the moment? That you're worried about if something goes wrong, if something bad happens, if you lose it. Or if you're waiting for a heads or tails answer. If the gap between what you know, the actual truth, and the situation, whatever that gap is, that's where the anxiety is. The gap between your knowledge of the situation itself and the situation itself. Whatever that gap is, that's where the anxiety lies. That's what you're fearing. So, well, let's deal with that one then. So there's a gap between your knowledge and of the situation and the situation itself. If there wasn't, you'd know exactly what was going on, and then you'd be able to predict. You'd be able to predict with some certainty, and you can gear yourself up. But it's hard to predict the future with any degree of certainty. So, what do? The answer's there. You try and close the gap. Well, how do I do that, Tony? You find the truth. You ask questions, not only to whatever is going on, but to yourself. Say, you're worried. You're worried you might not know what to do if the bad situation that you're hoping might never come to pass, but are worried about, what if that happens? We're asking that question because if you feel you cannot get enough truth, enough honesty, enough facts to close that gap, well, then take the situation itself or what you're worried about and say, okay, worst case scenario. Let's say that whatever happens that I'm worried about happens. Say you're worried if someone will reject you or will leave you or something like that. That's something that's quite common. Say you're worried about that. Well, it will hurt if that happens. Of course it will. It'll be something that you don't want to happen, but think about it. Think about your reaction to it. You know, it's just like a general planning for the worst case scenario. It's like a battle. You're surveying a battlefield. Your troops are lined up, one side or the other. This is a conceptual idea, by the way. This is not what a relationship should ever be. You've got two opposing sides, but you're not entirely sure of their forces. But you know your forces, or you should know. And if you don't, you should find out. So you're not going to go in there and you're not going to go into battle and not have a plan B. What if things go wrong? Because in a battle, you need to have a fallback position. There's being defeated in battle, but there's not losing the war. So you have to think, what happens if something goes wrong? I know it's painful. I know you don't want to think that. But currently, if you cannot close the gap between what you know and the situation or what might happen, well, then you deal with the situation, but that we don't know if it's going to happen or not. And you ask yourself questions you don't want to ask. What if it does? In the end, if you're fearing it, and there's a chance it might happen, there's lots of things you cannot control. One being, you don't know the answer. You don't know if you're going to get rejected or not. You don't know if you're going to get the job or not. Now you might win the day, and then you don't have to put this plan B into action. But to not have a plan B ready just in case, well, it's irresponsible to you. It's irresponsible to your own feelings. So you come up with a plan B, a fallback position. Now, it might not be romantic to do so, especially if you're waiting for an answer from someone or worrying what they might think. You find what's appropriate. You find what is right. You have to, because if you're in a relationship, for example, and you fear something might happen, well, that's the result of that is because in this relationship you haven't been so truthful and honest that you're having to guess. That gap is created. If honesty hasn't been created, if honesty hasn't been formed, on an offshoot, if you want an amazing relationship, you are honest with each other 100% of the time. But if you're not, there's the gap. And it's a mixture of honesty and trust that's the problem for that. So you have to. Either you're honest and you ask the questions that you need to close the gap, or you actually think, right, I need to think of a plan B. The plan B might not be romantic, it might not be what you think is correct in the situation, but you have to do it. It's the reality of the situation. Even if, and it doesn't have to be such a convoluted plan B, it can be just a sense of, well, if it happens, do you know what I can control? My reaction to it. And my reaction doesn't have to be devastating. It might be, but doesn't have to be. And in that time you're waiting for a yes or a no, you can start going, well, why don't I start giving myself evidence that I can recover, and recover quickly. Say, what happens if you get rejected? Okay. What if I sorted myself out? I don't know, started working out, started really working hard on my business, being an individual. Then if the worst does happen, what's my reaction going to be? If you don't work on yourself, if you're so vulnerable to this, and it does happen, there is nothing that you can fall back on. And so you will be faced with that existential question of something greater. See, what happens is, if a negative thing occurs within a circle, say that circle is love, or whatever like that. If you have no plan B, if you have nothing else, what that does is the negative aspect from in that circle, it breaks into another circle. So for example, someone breaks up with you or something like that. It fills the circle of love, and that is all thrust into chaos. And what happens is, if you haven't dealt with it, if you have no plan B, that can go into another circle of yourself, or of your mind. And that other circle could be your self-esteem. You might question, oh, maybe because this happened, suddenly I might not feel so good about myself. And then suddenly it goes into another circle. Maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with me, or I'm unlovable. And it carries on and on until it gets to the biggest circle, which is, what am I doing with my life? So having a plan B sorts out and stops that terrible chaos of events from occurring within you. That's what you can control right now, because of that gap. Because that gap is there. And the mind is going, I don't know, so let's think of a plan B. You might not want to. You might be thrashing your head as you're watching this going, I don't want to do that. I want to plan for success. But if you want to plan completely for success, then you know it's going to be all right. But you're watching this. And so it's not 100%, is it? It could be 99%, but even if it's just a 1% doubt, you are at liberty, because you need to put yourself first in the end all the time. Not so selfish as you're taking something away from someone else. Not pig-headed, not closing your mind to everything else and just focusing on you. But putting yourself, self-preservation in a way. At the end of the day, you're most responsible for yourself. That is a fact. So what do you have to do to be responsible for yourself? You try to reduce the suffering. So having a plan B works, because it will reduce the suffering. Accept it. Accept that there's a better way of doing things. Accept that there is a greater way of being in the situation you are in. Because what's the alternative? No, I will think of only it succeeding. You can't. That's a fantasy. I hope you never have to put this plan B into effect, but not having it in the first place is worse for your benefit. So you could have that gap of the unknown. And the second part of fear is you have that gap, but also you say to yourself, I know that if the worst comes to worst, that is the worst thing that's going to happen to me. That is going to be bad for me. that I know the repercussions of that bad event. I'm going to feel devastated. I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to ask the existential questions. I'm going to... I don't know. But you're already... Not only are you preempting the event, you're also preempting your reaction to it. But if you do what I mentioned earlier, which is have a plan B, then maybe actually you can chip away at your prediction of your reaction to it. You know, events, terrible events that may happen to you, a lot of the times you won't have control over it. We like to think we do. I mean, I do try and do all the time. But in the end, we do not have control over so many things that happen in our lives. But what we do have is a control over our reactions to it, over us thinking, well, what next? And the anxiety, that's true anxiety. Not so much, although it is a big factor, of course. We're anxious about what if that bad thing happens. But we're more anxious with the question of, well, what's it going to do to me? What am I going to feel afterwards should this happen? Am I going to feel this is a waste of time? Am I going to feel hopeless again? But as I've told you, there are ways that what you can do now to start to say, actually, I can already start preempting what I will do in a more positive way because I can control it. There are ways for you to control how you react to things in the future. Say you don't get the job, you don't get a promotion, or that's what you're worried about. You know, it's a flip of a coin, 50-50. But let's say you go, well, so what? What if I don't get the job? I'll find something else. Or maybe you can believe in what Steve Jobs said, saying that if you believe that the dots will connect down the road, that there is some sort of destiny, maybe that's something is going to, not getting that job will lead to another one, another job opportunity, or you'll apply for another one. Suddenly that one is fantastic. Then you'll look back years from now going, what did I have to worry about when it all worked out in the end? And that's what Steve Jobs said. It will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even if it leads you down the well-worn path. And that'll make all the difference. So, maybe what you're worried about, you might think, well, I'm going to feel bad about it. If it happens. I'll feel it's like a waste of time. I'll feel like I'm back to square one. I'll feel bad about myself. Well, take issue with that. Because that's not what your brain might be thinking. These are the stories that you're creating in the emotions. The stories you're creating. So they're not based on facts. Your emotions are not based on facts. If someone is able, not from being rejected or something, from a job interview or from, someone who they love or something like that. If one person is able to go, oh, brilliant, well, I'll go on to the next thing. If that is possible, then it's possible for you. Your future reactions are not preordained. They're all under your control. So if you want to lose the fear, lose the anxiety, then lose anxiety and fear over your reactions rather than the event. You cannot control if the event happens or not. You can control what you do next, what you think next. Then you won't worry about it. Then you won't think that if it goes well, great. If it doesn't, then oh well. Because you'll put pressure on it then. But if you go, look, if it doesn't happen, if I get rejected, if I lose what I think is good for me, well, that's okay. Because I have a plan B. Because I can control my emotions. I can go, well, if I get rejected, that means nothing for my self-esteem. It just means, well, it just means I guess it wasn't the right fit. Though I'm doubtful about it. Perhaps you're dealing with someone or dealing with an organization that isn't quite ready for you. You're not quite ready for them. And that's another issue, but we won't get into that now. About why they would reject you. About why something bad is going to happen. Because you can't control that. You can't control if people make mistakes. You really can't. But you can control what happens afterwards. The proactive element of you needs to be engaging all the time in your life. So this could be a great lesson for you to go, well, look, I'm anxious because I don't fear the bad thing happening so much. It's more my reaction to it. More if I'm thinking, if something bad is going to happen, I am going to think I'm unlovable. That I've wasted my time. That I'll never find something that good again. Well, first off, how do you know? Because emotions are not based on facts, as I've said before. So, disbelieve that emotions are based on facts. Emotions are based on your reactions to facts. And your reactions are under your control. If you're proactive. If you start thinking, actually, there's more to it than that. I don't have to be sad if it doesn't happen. If you can think that, anxiety will go away. Your fear of the future will go away. And it should. Pretty much everything that might happen that's bad. Look, something bad is going to happen in all of our lives. Throughout our lives. No one is blessed with the best life that has nothing going wrong with them. It's more a case of how obvious it is that it's bad for them. And in a sense, your anxiety and your fear is much more obvious in terms of what you're fearing will happen. So take the opportunity to sort it out that way. Lingering anxiety that sort of pops its head up every now and again, but very slightly. That'll only grow and grow. What you're feeling now, the great sense of angst and anxiety, that's the biggest clue. So you can actually do something about it. If you choose to say, actually, I have more control over my reactions to a hypothetical event. And lastly, and more incredible of all, well, it is if you recover and you feel better, what happens with this fear? What happens with fear and anxiety over in a situation means that you might not even take the risk in the first place. You might run away or not try and say, look, actually, I don't even want to be there when it's a heads or tails thing. I'm so afraid of a possibility that I won't even put myself in that situation in the first place. can think of many ways that could manifest itself. You have fear and anxiety, so you push it away instead. No matter how much you want it to succeed, or for there to get the best outcome that's not in your control, you'll think, well, why then take the risk? Knowing full well if I don't get it, or if the worst happens, then I know how I'm going to feel. Now look, so far we've established that actually your reactions is more under your control, even events that haven't even happened yet and might not yet even happen. You have control over that. So already we've taken a huge chunk of actual factual fear that actually doesn't exist, or is more under your control if you are responsible enough for your own emotions and your own life. But we run away from taking a risk. And if we do that, down the line, I don't know how far down the line, but certainly down the line, you will come to regret not taking the risk, taking the chance, seeing if it happens or not. One of the reasons why you put yourself in that position in the first place is because, hopefully, you've decided, you know what, I want to take the risk because it will give my life meaning, because I want to do it for myself, which should always be your primary concern. I want to put myself in this position where I'm taking a risk, where I'm going to have to wait until I get an answer, say, because I know that that's going to give my life meaning, responsibility, because I feel so responsible for myself that I can take the risk. And that might be why you're afraid to even take the risk in the first place, because you aren't so happy within yourself. And if you aren't so happy within yourself, then yeah, you might struggle to control your emotions, not only now, but hypothetically in the future. So of course, you need to focus on yourself. You need to focus on controlling your emotions and controlling them, that make sure that that you're in control of them, so that the external events have less of an impact on you. So yeah, maybe there's a bit of homework to do before you start taking bigger risks. But knowing that you can do it, and now, and very soon you could, especially if an opportunity comes your way that says, well, maybe you want to take the risk. The opportunity is there for you if you're willing to take the risk. Don't you want to be ready for it? Don't you want to say, look, I've worked on myself, now I can take the risk because it might be the next best opportunity that I'm going to get for a while. You want to be ready for that. And running away means that you won't even know. And you won't even learn from it if it goes wrong. And if you don't learn from an event that goes wrong, you'll never be able to go, well, then I can control my emotions, even if it does go wrong. You can be that example of when something goes wrong, you go, actually, I don't feel so bad anymore about it. I'm not blaming myself. I'm not saying that my self-esteem is gone. Because if I have evidence that I've actually reacted better to an event that went badly, that I was worried about, if I can go, well, actually, I'm not as bad as I thought it was, then I don't have to fear anything. It's not that, and that's the thing, we run away because maybe we can take smaller risks. We can only do that. And we're waiting for that criteria to appear. But it might never occur. Of course it won't occur, because the more you're willing to risk, the more alive you are, and in the end, you want to live. So there'll be a huge gap between what you really want and what you're willing to risk. You'll never get to the other side. You have to close that gap now. So if you're continually running away, when such a fear might manifest itself later on, you say, I can't take the anxiety. and so you run away, well, then you're not going to deal with it. You're not going to be able to find that. What are you waiting for? There's nothing to wait for. Everything to do with getting over anxiety, getting over fear, it's under your control. Not externally. It's like waiting for Godot. You can wait over and over again, hoping that you'll come across a situation where you will feel like you don't need to take any risks. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you'll have to. It's life. You can't take the easy way out. Take the better way out. Take the risks. Be brave. You never get less afraid of events that'll happen in the future. You never will. Events can always happen. That's not going to change. But it's how we react to it afterwards is what makes us braver, makes us more courageous. And in the end, when you look back on your life, you'll say, actually, I took the risks. I knew that that things might happen that might go wrong. But I took them anyway. Because I wanted to know. I wanted to know what the conclusion was. I wanted to know what was going to happen. There's nothing worse than never knowing what was going to happen. Life hands us suffering, but it also hands us opportunity. We have to go through it hand in hand with both, or nothing at all. And it starts with taking the risk and saying, I am in control of my emotions should the worst happen. And there are loads of ways of doing it. Have a plan B. Question whether that actually is the be-all and end-all of what you need. Because you don't know. You can believe that, when God closes a door, he opens a window. Or do what I do, for example, which is say something bad happens to me. I say, good. Let's see where that leads me. In the end of the day, you might be trying to reach a star, conceptually. But actually, when you're trying to get there, and you have all these dinks along the way, instead of you thinking it's going to go like that, it might go that way and then it gets to there. But you don't know, because you can't tell the future. So don't worry about it. Worry about what you're going to do next. So rather than trying to get to the star and then go, no, I can't do it. Just go, well, it might go like that. It might go there, but I'm still going forward. And going up. It's the journey. And you can do it. You have to be brave enough to do it. You'll get braver as things go on. And that's an incredible power to have. If anything, that's my final word to you. Even if that bad event occurs, because that bad event occurs that you're worried about, even it might not happen, but if it does, you will get braver, because if you learn from it, take the responsibility for that happening, stop being a victim, then it could be one of the better things that happens. So there you are. You have nothing to fear. And everything to be excited about. I really hope you are excited. Because you can turn fear and anxiety into opportunity. You just have to take responsibility for your reactions. Take responsibility for your emotions, and then you'll not fear anything. Because everything that happens to you is an opportunity, not something to fear. And then, perhaps, you will see the event, the situation you're in a much clearer and more honest light. And in the end, that gap between what you know and the situation will close because of it. Not that you needed more evidence or truth about the situation itself, but you finally found the truth about your role in it. And you will feel better. You will lose fear. You will lose the anxiety of what might happen and what you might feel from it. You will be free. And you will take everything that comes your way with a smile. And with a sense of what to do next. Be it good or bad. Either way, it'll be good for you. Thank you.